I was in the kitchen, scrubbing the last traces of grease off the frying pan, when Emily walked in, already dressed as if she were heading to a high-end cocktail party. She wore a sleek black dress, and her heels clicked against the floor like she had just stepped out of a magazine. I glanced up, half expecting her to mention dinner or make a comment about the mess I'd made in the kitchen, but instead, she leaned casually against the counter, fixing her lipstick in the microwave's reflection. Then, as casually as if she were discussing the weather, she said, "I'm going out after work tomorrow and won't be back until the day after." My hand paused mid-scrub as I blinked, processing her words, thinking I must have misheard. "What do you mean?" "Work trip," I asked, even though I knew her job didn't involve overnight travel. "Emily's an accountant. Spreadsheets don't require staying out late." "No, just going out," she replied, casually tossing her lipstick back into her purse without even glancing at me. It wasn't her words that hit me, but the indifference behind them, as if I didn't even deserve a proper explanation. It was something I was just supposed to accept without question. I stood there, waiting for her to offer more, maybe an excuse or a grin that would reveal it was all some joke. But instead, she grabbed her car keys and slipped them into her gym bag, the same one she always took when going to the gym. The silence between us thickened, pressing down on me like a heavy weight. "Where are you going?" I asked again, trying to keep my voice calm, even though inside I felt like a storm was brewing. I wasn't sure if it was going to explode from me or her. "Just out with friends," she finally said, meeting my gaze. "I told you, and that was it." She spun around and headed for the door, acting as if this was nothing out of the ordinary. Maybe some guys would let it go. Maybe they trust their wives enough not to give it a second thought. But I'm not one of those guys. And this wasn't the first time Emily had been acting off. She'd been slippery lately, always glued to her phone, locking it when I entered the room, texting late at night, leaving for the gym at odd hours, and coming back looking more refreshed than sweaty. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I felt heat rising in my chest. I've never been the jealous type, or at least I hadn't been, but lately something about this felt wrong. It was as if she was deliberately trying to push my buttons. I pulled out my phone and opened our text thread, scrolling through her recent messages. There wasn't much there, just her usual brief responses, mostly one-word answers, almost robotic. But then something caught my eye. Last Friday, when she said she was working late, she had texted, heading to the gym after, "Don't wait up," but now that I thought about it, she never came home sweaty that night, or with her gym bag, for that matter. Something wasn't adding up. That gut feeling, the one you get when you know you're being lied to but don't have the proof yet, hit me hard. But this time, things were about to change. I had an idea, maybe a foolish one, but I was desperate. So I made my move. I grabbed her gym bag from the closet, the same one she always took with her, and unzipped it. There were no gym clothes, no sneakers, no water bottle. Just a neatly folded blouse, a pair of heels, and a box of breath mints. Breath mints? Since when did she need those for a workout? That's when it hit me. All at once. She wasn't going to the gym. She was seeing someone else, and whatever her plans were for tomorrow, they definitely didn't involve friends. My heart pounded, and I had to sit down as my mind raced through all the little things I had missed, all the time she had slipped away unnoticed. I wanted to confront her right then, call her and shout, accuse her of everything that was boiling up inside me, but something held me back. I needed more proof. I couldn't just walk into this blind. I needed to catch her red-handed with no way for her to talk her way out of it. That's when the idea hit me, as clear and sharp as a lightning bolt. If Emily was lying, and I was sure she was, I had to catch her in the act. No more half-hearted excuses, no more casual lies. I wasn't just being paranoid, there was something going on. And tomorrow I was going to find out exactly what. I carefully placed her gym bag back in the closet, making sure it looked untouched. My pulse thudded in my temples, anger and frustration mounting. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind spun through every possible scenario, replaying all the lies she had fed me over the past weeks. Was this the first time, or had it been going on for months, maybe even longer? Every night out with friends, every gym session, every late night at work suddenly seemed suspicious. The next morning I woke up before Emily. She was still in bed, sleeping peacefully, as if she had nothing to worry about. I couldn't help but stare, wondering how she could lie so easily, without a trace of guilt. She looked innocent, too innocent. I made myself breakfast and pretended everything was normal. We barely spoke, just a quick good morning, and a see you later. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, the same routine as always. But this time, her kiss felt cold, mechanical, with no affection behind it. She was just playing a role, like a bad actor sticking to a script. As soon as she left, I sprang into action. I knew she'd head to work first and then off to wherever she had planned for the day. She said she wouldn't be back until tomorrow, which gave me plenty of time to figure out what was going on. I made a call to a friend who worked in tech, someone who knew how to set up tracking software. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but desperate times, right? He set me up with a simple app that could track her phone without her knowing. A quick install, and I'd have her location in real time. The plan was coming together when she got back from work to pick up her things. I played it cool, casually asking her what time she'd be home tomorrow, acting like I wasn't bothered. Without a second thought, she mentioned she'd be back late the next morning because she was staying over at a friend's place after their night out. Every word out of her mouth felt like a lie now. Even the way she said "love you" as she walked out the door, like she was following some secret set of rules in a game only she was playing. As soon as she left, I grabbed my phone and opened the app. Her little blue dot was moving. But not toward the gym or any restaurant where she'd supposedly meet her friends. No, it was heading straight for a hotel. My heart lurched in my chest, the confirmation hitting me like a blow to the stomach. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The boldness of her actions made my blood boil. She thought I was too blind, too stupid to see what was going on right in front of me. But that's the thing about people like her, they underestimate you. They believe they've got you fooled, that you'll just sit there while they pull the strings behind your back. Not this time. I grabbed my keys, threw on my jacket, and headed out. If she was meeting someone at a hotel, I was going to be there to see it for myself. This wasn't just about catching her in the act. One wanted to see the look on her face when she realized her game was over. I drove on autopilot, my mind racing, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Anger wasn't even what I was feeling anymore. I had moved past that. There was this cold, burning focus, the kind you get when you're about to do something that can't be undone. I wasn't just seeking answers. I was hunting for the truth that would break everything apart. The GPS showed her blue dot stopped outside the Regent, one of those boutique hotels downtown. Swanky. Upscale, the kind of place you'd go to impress someone, not where you'd crash with friends after a night out. That much was clear. My stomach twisted as I parked across the street, eyes fixed on the entrance. The revolving door spun lazily as a few business people came and went. I pulled out my phone, staring at her location. She was still there. Any last sliver of doubt vanished, replaced by a chilling certainty Emily wasn't here for work, and she sure as hell wasn't with her friends. I waited, the minutes dragging by, each second making my pulse pound louder in my ears. Then I saw her. Emily stepped out of a cab, her heels clicking on the pavement as she made her way to the entrance. She looked stunning, if I'm being honest. Her hair was styled, and her dress, one I'd never seen before, looked sleek and expensive. But something about the way she moved was different. More confident. Like she knew exactly what she was about to do, and didn't care who saw. And then he appeared. Some guy, tall, dressed in one of those designer suits that scream money, walked out of the hotel to meet her at the entrance. He smiled a cocky grin, like he owned the place, and placed his hand on the small of her back as they walked inside together. My whole body tensed up, a surge of rage roaring in my chest like a fire being stoked. There it was. The truth, standing right in front of me. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My vision narrowed, focusing solely on them, on the way she looked at him. That smile, the same smile she used to give me, was now aimed at a stranger. My blood pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't just charge in there like a lunatic and start swinging. As much as I wanted to, I needed to be smart about this. I watched as they walked through the revolving doors and disappeared into the lobby. The temptation to follow them immediately was overwhelming, but I held back. I needed a plan. I couldn't just burst in without thinking. So I did something ridiculous. I called the hotel. "Hi, I'm trying to reach my wife. She's staying there tonight," I said, doing my best to sound calm, like it was no big deal. "Of course, sir. May I have her name?" the receptionist asked, polite as ever. I gave Emily's name, my heart pounding in my throat. After a brief pause, the receptionist returned. "Yes, Mrs. Taylor has checked in. Would you like me to transfer you to her room?" Her room? She had booked a room. Not staying with friends, not here for work. Her room. My hands shook as I thanked the receptionist and hung up the phone. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to see this for myself. I got out of the car, crossed the street, and pushed through the hotel doors with a determined stride. The lobby was quiet, soft jazz music playing in the background, but all I could hear was the thudding of my own heartbeat. My stomach was in knots, each step bringing me closer to a reality I wasn't sure I could handle. I approached the front desk, trying to maintain my composure. "Hi, I'm meeting someone, my wife. Emily, she just checked in," I said, forcing a smile onto my face. The clerk, a young guy with slick back hair, glanced at me before typing something into the computer. "She just checked in a few minutes ago. Room 504. Would you like me to call up for you?" I shook my head. "No need. I'll surprise her. Yeah, that was one way to put it." I turned and walked toward the elevator, my legs feeling heavier with every step. The doors slid open and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the 5th floor. The elevator hummed as it ascended, each passing floor peeling away another layer of my life. When the elevator chimed, I stepped into a silent hallway, the kind that feels like a tomb when you know something is about to die. Room 504 was just ahead, but it felt like the corridor stretched on forever. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I stood in front of the door, staring at the brass numbers as though they held all the answers. I reached for the handle but paused, my hand frozen. I didn't knock. I just stood there, paralyzed, every part of me screaming to turn around and leave, but I could not now. I took a deep breath, raised my fist, and knocked. Seconds passed, each dragging on like an eternity. Then I heard footsteps, soft, muffled. The door clicked open. And there she was. The door swung open and Emily stood in front of me. The moment felt surreal, like I had stepped into a different reality where everything looked familiar, but nothing was right. Her eyes widened for a brief second, just long enough for me to catch a glimpse of panic, but she quickly masked it with irritation. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and sharp, as if she didn't want anyone to overhear. I couldn't respond right away. I was too busy taking in the scene behind her. The room was dimly lit, one of those fancy hotel lamps casting a warm glow over the bed. And there he was, the guy in the suit. He sat casually on the edge of the bed, jacket off, tie loosened, looking far too comfortable for my liking. He glanced at me with mild curiosity, as if I had disrupted his evening plans. "Who's this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow as though he had the right to inquire. Emily stepped forward, blocking my view of him, gripping the doorframe. "I asked you a question," she said, her tone now firmer. "Why are you here?" I couldn't believe it. She wasn't apologetic, wasn't flustered or caught off guard. She was annoyed, like I was the one out of line for showing up, like I was the problem. "I think the real question," I said, my voice thick with barely contained rage, "is what you're doing here. Who is this?" I gestured toward the man behind her. Emily folded her arms, her eyes narrowing, refusing to glance back at the guy. "It's not what you think," that line, a classic, tired excuse. My blood boiled. "Not what I think. You've booked a hotel room with some guy, and I'm supposed to believe it's innocence. Don't insult me." She rolled her eyes. "Calm down, Derek, this isn't some soap opera." I laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound that hurt coming out. "Calm down? Are you serious? You lied to me, say you're going out with friends, and now you're here in a hotel room with him," I snapped, jerking my head toward the man who still sat there like this was just a normal evening for him. "So, why don't you tell me exactly what's going on?" She sighed, exasperated, like I was a child she had to explain something obvious to. "Fine, you want the truth. Here it is. I've been seeing someone else." I froze. Hearing the words out loud, spoken so nonchalantly, hit me like a punch in the gut. My legs felt weak, but I stayed standing. I had suspected it for weeks, but hearing her say it so bluntly, without any hint of guilt or shame, was like stepping into a void. "You've been seeing someone?" I echoed, my voice quieter now, the anger slowly giving way to something heavier, colder. She shrugged. "Yeah, I wasn't planning on telling you like this, but since you decided to play detective and show up, now you know." I couldn't wrap my head around how calm she was, how she stood there like this was a regular conversation, like we were just discussing weekend plans. No apology, no regret, just the cold truth dropped on me like a weight that kept sinking deeper. And him, I nodded toward the guy who was still lounging on the bed, watching this unfold with mild amusement, as though he found the whole thing entertaining. "What's his deal?" She glanced back at him briefly, her expression softening, as if to reassure him everything was under control. Then she turned back to me, her face hardening again. "This is Lucas. We've been seeing each other for a while now." Lucas, of course, he had a name, and it suited him, slick, rich, completely unfazed by the chaos unfolding in front of him. For a while I repeated, the words thick in my throat. "How long?" "A few months," she said, as casually as if she were telling me what she had for lunch. My head spun, the weight of everything crashing down at once. Months. She had been sneaking around for months, and now she acted like I was overreacting. I glanced at Lucas, who hadn't moved, his arms resting casually on his knees, still watching me like this was some twisted entertainment. I wanted to punch him, to wipe that smug look off his face, but I knew better than to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "So what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're just done with us? 7 years, and you're throwing it all away for this?" Emily's expression remained unchanged. If anything, she looked bored. "Derek, don't make this dramatic. Things haven't been good between us for a long time. You know that." Her words stung. The nerve of her to act like this was some mutual, inevitable collapse, like I had any role in her lying and sneaking around for months. "So your solution was to cheat? To sleep with someone else behind my back?" She sighed again, with that same tone of irritation that made me want to scream. "Look, I didn't plan for it to happen this way, okay? But it did. And now we're here. There's no point in dragging this out." She didn't care. Not even a little. There was no remorse, no hesitation. She was already done, already moved on. I felt something inside me break, something deep that I hadn't even realized I was still holding on to. I glanced at Lucas again, then back at her. "Were you in love with him?" I asked, though the words tasted bitter in my mouth. For the first time, she hesitated, but only for a second. I don't know, she said, as if it didn't really matter. Maybe, but that's not the point, is it? I stood there, letting the weight of her words settle in. There was nothing left to say. She had made her decision long before I even realized what was happening. And now, standing in that hotel room, I understood that whatever I thought we had was gone. Emily tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a smug, condescending smile. "So, are we done here, Derek?" she asked, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. The way she said it, with that smirk, as if this entire situation was just a small inconvenience, was the final straw. I could feel my body start to tremble, not from sadness anymore, but from pure, unfiltered rage. Every muscle in my body tensed, my chest rising and falling as I fought to keep the fury from boiling over. I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and for the first time I realized just how much I didn't recognize her anymore. This wasn't the Emily I had married, the one I had spent years building a life with. This was someone else entirely, someone cold, manipulative, heartless. I didn't even know the person standing in front of me. But she wasn't done. "What did you expect?" she continued, her voice now dripping with bitterness. "You think I could just sit at home, waiting for you to notice me? You were so wrapped up in your own world, your work, whatever you were doing. You didn't even see me anymore." "You didn't see you," I repeated, my voice rising in anger. "I worked my ass off to give us a good life. Everything I did was for us, for you. And this is how you repay me." She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms like she was lecturing a clueless child. "Oh, please, don't play the martyr. This isn't about your job, Derek. This is about you never being there. You were physically present, but it was like I didn't exist. And your solution was to find someone else." I shot back, my voice growing louder, each word hitting like a bullet. "Instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix things, you just went behind my back with him." I pointed toward Lucas, who hadn't budged from his spot, watching the scene like he was enjoying a cheap soap opera. Emily didn't even flinch. "I didn't sneak around, Derek," I moved on. "You were never going to change. Lucas, he sees me. He actually cares about me. Cares about you," I scoffed, my eyes finally locking on Lucas for the first time. "Yeah, I bet he does. I'm sure he's deeply concerned about your well-being." Finally, Lucas joined the conversation. He leaned back on the bed, his arms casually resting behind his head like he was lounging on a beach. "Look, man, I get it. You're upset, but this thing between me and Emily has been coming for a long time. It wasn't just some fling." I couldn't believe the arrogance. He was talking to me as if we were equals, as if I should just accept this and move on. "You think you're doing her a favor, breaking up my marriage so you can swoop in and play the hero?" Lucas shrugged, the same smug grin plastered on his face. "Maybe it's not about you, man. Maybe you weren't giving her what she needed." I took a step forward, my fists clenched, but Emily quickly moved between us, blocking my path. "Don't," she warned, her voice sharp. "I don't even think about it. You don't get to act like the victim here." I stopped, glaring at her, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. "Victim? I'm not acting like anything. I've been loyal to you for 7 years, trusted you. And you've been sleeping with this guy behind my back for months, and I'm the problem." She shook her head, almost as if she pitied me. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't just about cheating. It's about you never being enough. I needed more, Derek, and you weren't willing to give it." Her words cut deep, like a blade slicing through the last bit of hope I had left. There was no regret in her voice, no second thoughts. No "maybe we can fix this." She had already rewritten the story in her head, casting herself as the victim of some imaginary neglect. She had justified everything. In her mind, this was my fault. I looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly the weight of everything hit me like a hammer. The betrayal, the lies, the months of sneaking around, it all came crashing down. The woman I had loved, the one I had trusted and dedicated years of my life to, was gone. She had been gone for a long time, I just hadn't noticed. A long, painful silence stretched between us, like a vast canyon that neither of us could cross. My chest tightened, the anger mixing with a deep, hollow sadness. I could feel the tears threatening to rise, but I pushed them back. I wasn't going to break in front of her. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Finally, I spoke, my voice quieter now, barely above a whisper. "You could have talked to me. Emily, you could have told me you weren't happy. We could have worked on it. But instead, you destroyed everything." She didn't respond. She just looked at me with cold, empty eyes. She had nothing left to say. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. "So, what now? You and Lucas live happily ever after, is that it?" Emily gave me a look that was almost patronizing. "I don't owe you an explanation. Derek, I'm moving on. You should too." Something inside me snapped a final breaking point I didn't even know I had. I took one last look at her, at the woman who had once been my entire world, and realized she wasn't worth fighting for anymore. Not now. She had made her decision, and so had I. Without another word, I turned and walked out of that room, my fists clenched so tightly I could feel my nails digging into my palms. The moment I stepped into the hallway, a wave of emotions crashed over me: anger, sadness, disbelief all at once. I leaned against the wall, trying to breathe, trying to steady myself, but it was useless. Everything was falling apart around me. That's when I knew. I was done. Done with her, done with the lies, done pretending like this was something I could fix. I wasn't the one who had broken us, she was. The elevator ride down felt like it lasted an eternity. My mind was blank, yet filled with so much noise, so much chaos that I couldn't process a single clear thought. My hands were still shaking, my heart pounding against my ribcage. But there was nothing left to say, no more words to throw at her, no pleas to make sense of it all. I had seen everything I needed to see. When the elevator doors finally opened to the lobby, I forced myself to walk out, as if I hadn't just watched my entire marriage crumble to dust. I had to get out of there, away from the polished chandeliers and gleaming floors of that cursed hotel, away from the suffocating stench of betrayal that lingered in the air like cheap cologne. Outside, the evening was settling in, the streets alive with the usual city noise, people laughing, cars honking, neon lights flickering. It felt strange how the world kept spinning, as if nothing significant had just happened, as if I hadn't just watched my life implode in a single instant. I didn't even make it to my car before my legs gave out and I collapsed onto a nearby bench. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright finally wore off. I sat there, staring blankly at the street in front of me, though I wasn't really seeing anything. The numbness was setting in, that hollow, empty sensation that gnaws at you when the full weight of reality finally sinks in. Emily was gone, replaced by a stranger who had ripped out my heart, spat on it, and handed it to another man like a worthless transaction. What hit me hardest was that I should have seen it coming. All those little signs I ignored, the gut feelings I pushed aside. How had I been so blind? I replayed every moment in my head, trying to pinpoint when she stopped loving me. Was it months ago? Years? Or had I been fooling myself all along, thinking we were something we never truly were? Almost on instinct, I pulled out my phone and opened our old text messages, hoping to find some clue buried in the I love yous and mundane conversations. But as I scrolled, everything felt empty, like I was looking at someone else's life, someone else's memories. This wasn't us anymore. My thumb hovered over her name, the urge to call her still there, buried beneath all the anger and pain. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, make her explain why she chose him, why she threw everything away. But I knew better. What good would it do? She didn't care. She made that perfectly clear when she looked me in the eye and lied so effortlessly. She'd moved on. And the harsh truth hit me. There was no getting her back. And deep down, I didn't want her back. Not the version of Emily who could stand there without an ounce of guilt or shame and admit she'd been cheating for months. I didn't want the person who made me feel like the problem while she had been tearing us apart all along. I stared at my phone for what felt like hours, but eventually I did the only thing I could do. I blocked her, deleted every message, every photo. I erased her from my phone like I wished I could erase her from my memory. It wasn't closure, but it was a start. I leaned back on the bench, the cool night air stinging my face as I took a deep breath. For the first time since this nightmare began, the full weight of it all hit me. My marriage was over. The life I thought I was building with her, the future I had imagined, it was all shattered, like a million pieces scattered beyond repair. I don't know how long I sat there, staring into the emptiness, trying to make sense of the disaster that was now my life. I wasn't ready to go home. The thought of walking into that house, the house we built together, made me sick. Every corner of it would remind me of her, of the lies, of all the nights I waited up for her, thinking she was just out with friends. It would be too much. But where else could I go? I didn't want to call anyone. Didn't want to explain what had just happened. I could already hear their voices in my head, telling me to move on, that she wasn't worth it, that I'd be better off without her. But none of that would change the fact that it felt like my whole world had just been torn apart. I closed my eyes and leaned forward, resting my head in my hands. I could feel the tears welling up, but I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to break down here, on a random bench, like some tragic character in a movie. But the pain, the betrayal, it was too much, overwhelming. I thought about everything we'd been through. The good times, the moments where it felt like nothing could touch us. The quiet nights on the couch, laughing at terrible movies. The way we used to talk about the future as if it was something we'd face together. And now, all of that felt like a lie. I had heard people talk about betrayal, how it felt like a knife in the gut, how it turned your world upside down. But nothing could have prepared me for this, how it hollowed me out, left me feeling like there was nothing left. It wasn't just losing her. It was losing the person I thought I was. Without her, I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. I sat there, frozen, as the city moved around me, people passing by, oblivious to the storm raging inside my head. That's when I realized I had a choice to make. I could stay here, drowning in this pain, letting it consume me, or I could stand up, leave this nightmare behind, and start over. It wouldn't be easy hell. It would probably be the hardest thing I'd ever do, but staying in this dark, broken place wasn't an option. Not anymore. Emily was gone, and the life I thought we had disappeared with her, but I wasn't gone. Not yet. I stood up, my legs unsteady, my heart still heavy. But as I took my first step, I knew one thing for sure. I was walking away from her, from the lies, from the betrayal, and I wasn't going to look back. The next morning felt surreal, waking up alone in my bed. The emptiness beside me screamed louder than any alarm clock. I had barely slept, but somehow, the sunlight creeping through the curtains reminded me that life was moving forward, whether I was ready for it or not. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling numb, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Last night I had made the decision to walk away, but now that the dust had settled, the harsh reality hit me all over again. Emily was gone, and our marriage was over. I was free from the weight of her betrayal, but that freedom felt more like a burden, pressing down on my chest. I forced myself out of bed, every movement heavy with exhaustion, and made my way downstairs. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone, plates still piled up from a dinner I hadn't bothered to clean, mail scattered across the counter, and the fridge door slightly open from when I had grabbed something in the middle of the night, too lost in my thoughts to close it. It was like time had frozen in this space, except for me. I made coffee, not because I wanted it, but because I needed something to do, something that felt remotely normal. But even that small, familiar task felt strange now. My mind kept drifting back to her. What was she doing right now? Was she still at the hotel? Had she woken up next to him? Did she even feel the slightest twinge of guilt? Or was she already moving on like none of it mattered? I picked up my phone, still reflexively checking for any messages, as if she might have texted me. But of course there was nothing. She wasn't going to apologize, wasn't going to reach out. She had made it clear how little I meant to her, and now she was out there living her life without a second thought. Meanwhile, I was standing here, in what was now my kitchen, trying to make sense of what was left of my life. The first pangs of anger surged through me again, like a wave crashing over me, reminding me that this wasn't just sadness. It wasn't simply the end of a marriage. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. How could she do this? How could she stand there and act like I was the one who wasn't enough? The fury rose up in me, and before I knew it, I grabbed the mug of coffee and hurled it against the wall. The ceramic shattered, sending coffee splattering everywhere, but it didn't feel like enough. I wanted to break everything in this house that reminded me of her. I wanted to tear down the memories, throw them out into the street, and set them on fire. The wedding photos, the framed pictures from vacations, the stupid little trinkets we'd collected over the years, all of it. But I didn't. I stood there, staring at the mess I'd made, breathing heavily, my hands shaking. Breaking things wasn't going to fix what she had broken. It was in that moment, standing in the chaos of my frustration, that my phone buzzed. For a split second, my heart lurched. A desperate part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, she had reached out. Maybe she had finally realized what she had done and wanted to explain herself. But when I glanced at the screen, it wasn't her, it was her mother. I stared at the name on the screen, uncertain whether I should answer. Emily's mom, Sandra, had always been kind to me. We weren't particularly close, but she treated me like family, always checking in at gatherings, sending birthday cards, even when Emily herself barely remembered the date. I didn't know if Sandra knew what had happened, or if Emily had already spun her version of events. Reluctantly, I answered. "Hey, Sandra," I said, my voice rough from everything that had happened. There was a pause on the other end, as if she wasn't sure how to start. "Derek," she said softly, her voice gentle but filled with concern. "I don't know exactly what's going on, but Emily called me last night. She said things were over between you two." Hearing it from someone outside the bubble of my pain made it all feel even more real. I pressed my fingers to my forehead, feeling the weight of everything settle in again. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's one way to put it." Sandra sighed, the sound heavy with sympathy. "She didn't tell me much, but Derek, I know my daughter. If she's done something to hurt you, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened, but I just want you to know I'm here for you if you ever want to talk." Her words caught me off guard. I had expected her to defend Emily, to tell me I wasn't seeing the whole picture, that there was more to the story. But instead, she sounded apologetic, almost like she knew her daughter was capable of what I had witnessed with my own eyes. "I appreciate that," I replied, my voice breaking. "I really do. It's just a lot right now." "I understand," Sandra said quietly. "I won't push. Just take care of yourself, okay? You don't deserve this." Hearing those words, "you don't deserve this," hit me harder than I expected. After everything Emily had said, all the blame she had tried to throw at me, I had begun to question if any of this was my fault. Maybe I hadn't been enough. Maybe I had missed the signs. But hearing Sandra say those words, even in her uncertain way, made me realize that no matter what twisted reasons Emily had given, I didn't deserve to be treated like this. After we hung up, I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone, feeling the exhaustion settle deep in my bones. I couldn't keep doing this replaying last night, running through every painful detail as if I was addicted to the suffering. If I was going to survive this, truly survive it, I had to let Emily go, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. I had to stop letting her have power over my thoughts. I started walking through the house, opening closets, drawers, places where traces of her still remained. Her clothes, her books, the little things she had left behind when she rushed off with Lucas. I grabbed boxes and bags, anything I could find, and started packing it all away. It felt strangely therapeutic, like I was reclaiming the space she had once occupied. By the time I finished, the house felt emptier than it ever had, but in a good way. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like it belonged to me again. I didn't know what my next steps would be, whether I'd file for divorce right away or take some time to process everything, but for now, this was enough. I sat on the couch, looking around at the blank walls and cleared out shelves. It wasn't much, but it was a small step toward rebuilding what she had torn apart. The days that followed were a blur of quiet moments and small decisions. Each one felt heavier than it should have. But with every box I packed away, with every photo I deleted, I felt a little lighter. It wasn't about erasing her entirely. Those years we spent together, for better or worse, were still a part of my life. But I wasn't going to let the weight of her betrayal crush me any longer. I remember the moment I finally sat down with the divorce papers. I hadn't rushed into it. I took my time, really thinking about what my next move would be. There was still a small, foolish part of me that wondered if there was some way to fix things, if we could talk it out, if I could forgive her. But then I remembered that night at the hotel. Her cold, indifferent expression, the way she stood there spinning lies to cover the truth, treating our marriage like it was some heavy weight she was relieved to drop. I knew, even if I wanted to, I could never forgive that. Trusting her again was impossible. So I signed the papers. It was quiet, almost anticlimactic, no final confrontation, no dramatic showdown where I hurled her words back at her. Just a few quick signatures, and it was over. Emily had become a chapter in my life that had closed. A painful one, no doubt, but one that taught me more than I ever expected. I didn't hear from her for a while after that. I think part of her assumed I'd come crawling back, begging for some kind of reconciliation. But she had underestimated me, just like she had underestimated my ability to see through her deceit. I wasn't going to play the background character in her new life with Lucas. That role was finished. Then, a couple of weeks later, a message appeared on my phone out of the blue. It was from Emily, brief and simple, as if she hadn't shattered my world not so long ago. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Can we talk?" The audacity of it made me laugh, a dry, bitter laugh. Can we talk now? She wanted to talk. After months of sneaking around, after destroying everything we had, she suddenly believed a conversation could fix it all. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What was there to say? I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of dragging me back into her orbit. I had already spent too much time agonizing over why she did what she did, torturing myself with thoughts of how I could have done things differently. I wasn't going to do that anymore. In those weeks of silence, I had learned more about myself than I had in years. It wasn't just about letting go of Emily, it was about letting go of who I had become in that marriage. Somewhere along the line, I had lost pieces of myself, molding into a version of me that I thought Emily wanted. I had stopped doing the things I loved, stopped pursuing the hobbies and passions that made me who I was. I had turned into a shadow, a reflection of her desires and needs, while mine faded away. But now I had the time and space to rebuild. I could rediscover the parts of me that had been lost in the chaos of that relationship. I started small, picking up old books I hadn't touched in years, going for long walks with no destination in mind. It wasn't a massive transformation, but it felt like progress. One day I decided to revisit a place I hadn't been to in ages, a hiking trail Emily never liked, but one I used to love. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the trees, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm. The chaos of the past few weeks had finally quieted, leaving me with something closer to peace. As I stood at the top of the trail, looking out over the landscape, I realized something important. Moving on wasn't just about letting go of Emily, it was about letting go of the version of myself that had clung so desperately to something that had already crumbled. I wasn't that person anymore, the one who would chase after someone who didn't respect or value me. I was done being that person. The message from Emily remained unopened in my phone. I didn't need to read it. I didn't need her excuses, her half-hearted apology. I didn't need closure from her, because I had already found it on my own. I found it in the quiet moments, in the steps I took to rebuild my life without her in it. By the time I walked back down the trail, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange. It was breathtaking, and in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Not for some grand romantic reunion, not for some dramatic showdown where I got the last word, but for myself, for the life I was slowly piecing back together from the ruins of what once seemed like my entire world. Emily was my past, but I was finally stepping into my future, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew I'd be okay.